In this video, I want to cover some floor bridging variations using a thigh cuff. If you don't have a thigh cuff or ankle cuffs, I highly recommend you get some. And I love the ones from Elements by Momentum World. High quality, really worth the investment. I have them for all of my reformers. So I have 10 sets for my studio and 2 sets for my side studio, which I'm in right now shooting. So check out Elements by Momentum World. You'll love them. I'm using the stripes, and I found that when I'm shooting videos, you can really see where the thigh cuffs are in the stripes, and that's why I like these. And they're my favorite signature, black and white, but you can get them in different colors. Anyway, that's a side note. But I want to start by talking about getting off the reformer and trying some, I call them modifications from the trap table, from the Cadillac. So anytime we do thigh cuffs or ankle cuffs or wrist cuffs or upper arm, there's so many we can do on the floor using the reformer. So I'm going to first start by putting this thigh cuff on my right side, camera side. I'm going to put it up. There's a very loud siren outside. Hopefully everything's okay. I'm going to angle my box towards the riser. Now you'll notice when I do right side body, I'm going to be closer to the reformer because I want my shin aligned with the swivel pulley. So when I go and switch it to my left, you'll notice we'll need to move our body out. So now the left is aligned with the swivel pulley. I'm going to demo today on one red. I'm going to pull this out and clip it on. Now we're going to start with some real basics using the box. You don't have to use the box. You can use an arc barrel as well too if you don't. If you want to mix it up, this works like a foot bar. This edge of the box kind of works like a foot bar. And at least that's how I think about it. But I do have some clients that need a little bit more contact point on their feet. So I use, I think it's just like the arc. It's not the sitting arc like, I don't know what it is. It's just a solid arc without a platform. But if you have, the balance body also makes that foam arc. You just take the take the take the chair off and like push it up against it. If I don't recommend doing this heavy, so you're not going to be worried about the box from moving. So I'm going to start left justified on the box. So my right knee is now in line with the swivel pulley. And I'm going to start by just thinking about that traction of the shin being pulled to the swivel pulley, to the upright at the end. I'm not thinking about lifting my hips vertically. I think that when I do my bridge, that shin is pulling the thigh. That thigh is pulling the hips, and the hips are being pulled away from the lumbar, the lower back, so I get that length. Starting by pressing my arms lightly. Now, when we do single leg, you can also take your base of support on your arms and bring them out wide or challenge with them low, narrow. Completely up to you whether you want to do that. But when I do have students that are still working on core control and pelvic alignment, I like to take the arms a little wider. Starting with both feet on, you'll notice they're at the heels, and I'm just going to think about that pulley pulling me forward, getting that length as I bridge and rolling back down. Now you'll notice if I simply lift my hips vertically, watch the carriage. It doesn't really move that much. See how little it moves? But if I initiate movement with the shins going forward, I'm going to get a lot more movement in that carriage, which tells me I'm getting that length instead of just pelvic pressing up. So let's do a couple more where we roll our hips forward, letting that carriage pull us, getting to my max bridge, and then keeping that reach forward as I roll down through that spine. Now I should have put a mat underneath me because this floor is kind of slippery, but I'll use it as a challenge. So let's do 2 more. Roll it up. Feel like my number 1 goal is to close that carriage. And 1 more. Now, just to be even, let's go ahead and move it to the other leg. You can clip 2 on as well, so you don't have to switch them. I just don't find it that difficult. And then obviously I'm shifting to the side. So you can either set up with both on, with whether you're doing this at home by yourself or your studio, or whether you're going to do this in class. If you're going to do a group class, maybe just keep them both on. So you can say to students, all right, clip the other ones off. It's up to you. So arms are side your thighs, hips, and let's focus on our number 1 goal is closing that carriage as we bridge. Four more. And 3. And 2. And 1 more. Now, we can add marching on the right leg and roll down. We can also flip that pulley, the D ring, underneath, bridge it up, and we can add some work there. Pulling it, rolling it down, roll it up, and do some hip flexor. So there's tons of choreography you can do with that. I'm going to go back to the right. If you want to add some hip flexor strength, I guess I didn't need to unclip it. Now you could also add some leg choreography on the non-loaded side, which I'll show you here. Make sure it's pretty snug. So I'm going to get myself set, scoot back over so my right shin is aligned. I'm going to roll up. Remember, the goal is close that carriage so you get that traction. And I'm going to add tabletop. I'm going to do marching with single leg stretch, back down, roll down. I'm going to roll up. I'm going to take the leg down. I'm going to flex it and pull 2, 3, point. Pull 2, 3, point. Roll down. So there's so many different leg choreographies you can do with this bridge series. It's a really great way to kind of get the students to understand how to facilitate spine length during bridge, having that traction, and really cueing them every time they bridge up, try to close that carriage, try to get that stretch versus trying to make the focus on how high you can lift your hips. So now I'm going to do a single leg bridge with single leg stretch at the same time. I can take the long lever of the leg out, engage that left glute, and challenge myself to keep my hips level, loading my abdominals as well. I can add tons of different thread the needles. I can do a figure 4, which is going to be here. I'll show you the thread the needle at the top. Leg goes under, rotate pelvis around the head of the right femur, back up, back up, down, thread through, back up. So those are some wonderful options to do. I'm going to take the box away. and switch. Floor bridging. As you get used to the different variations and options you have, you're going to want to experiment. The basic floor bridging without the box is kind of nice because you've got a nice stable anchor with the floor. Unlike the carriage where I can bridge myself up. Actually, I'm going to start a little bit. You know what? I'm going to do this because I want more of a stretch. So I'm going to loop it around once, and that's just going to give me a little bit more stretch. So basic startup is just that roll here, roll, add marching, and back down, roll, add thread the needle, and back down. Leg is the tabletop, bridge it up, single leg stretch, lift and lowers, roll down. Take my arms out to the side. I'm going to do open out, leg back up, bridge as I lower, and roll it down. Still same rule applies. I'm still thinking about as I lower the leg, engage that right glute, close that carriage. Really feel that length and stretch as I do that. Circles, out, circle. As I raise my leg, I bridge. Roll it down, circle. Reverse. Closing that carriage. So those are some options you can do. Feet on the floor. Body on the floor, sorry. Then we can do feet on the floor. I was trying to think about where we're going next. Box, upper body on the box. Let me show you that. And I want you to take all of these different exercises and play around with them. And don't get stuck on just one or the other. You don't have to always. That one's going to require 3 reps. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take the swivel pulley halfway down for that one. So you're basically changing where the body is in space. I'm going to go back a little bit more. So right about there feels about right for me. Make sure my pants aren't falling down. All right, I'm going to do hands behind the head. And I've got my shoulder blades at the edge, kind of like in semicircle. And I'm going to start lift it up. This also can be done on the spine arc as well. So please, even though I'm not pulling the arcs out today, please try them out. You may like them. I'm always a fan, for me personally, because I have such thoracic kyphosis for many, many years, that anytime I can get on a nice hard spine, on an edge, my spine on an edge, it feels good for me because I love that stretch, but some people don't. So I'm going to start lifted. And first thing I'm going to do, engage my abs, funnel my ribs by creating that length through my skull, and let that carriage close as I bridge and roll it down. And again. Now I can start stretching over, feeling that part of my spine at the box edge stretching. Remember, it's not about hips to ceiling. It's about reaching the knees forward as the carriage closes to create that spine length. I can add some arm work. Raise and lower. Lower arms. Raise arms. Stretch and lift. This floor is slippery, so if you have a slippery floor, please use your caution. Normally, if I wasn't just showing this quick and dirty, I'd have a mat. Second time I've said that this class.
So maybe I should get a mat. So now I can add opposite arm work once I've anchored and lower back down, getting that stretch on my upper back. Bridge it up by closing the carriage, marching. I can even march right and left, right and left, and roll down. Don't forget to try different hand positions. You can do that thread the needle I showed earlier. You can add some leg choreography, little pulses up. Now, when I do the pulses up, I want you to notice I'm trying to close that carriage. If I think about closing that carriage, I'm going to much better glute work and less compression to my back. A lot of the times when we're doing our pulses and our hips and our bridge series, I can tend to see students tightening their back. But once you do this with them, I'll show you a few on the other leg. Once you do this with yourself or students, you'll start getting to know that neural programming of length. Because we can, as teachers, we can say it over and over and over and over and over again to our students. But if we haven't created a sense, a feeling sense, which this does, if you have the trap table, you've done series like this on the trap table, and you understand how those springs on the trap are helping to facilitate length. So I'm just going to start right here, get myself stretched over and close the carriage as I bridge up. And then use that resistance to roll it back down, getting that stretch of my spine, roll those hips forward and up as the carriage closes. Add some marching, stretch, curl those hips, add thread the needle. I can take my arms out if I need a little bit more support or I want to add some choreography. So just play around with what feels right for you and your students. Try it on the floor, try it feet on the box, try it back on the box. There's so many bridging variations. If you need to put a ball, I will sometimes, with my students that have their legs all over the place, when I'm doing this series, I'll put a ball between their knees or a yoga block or some bands around and maybe do all of those series before I strap them up, or just strap them up and hold that if I'm not going to be doing any marching or leg choreography. Showing pelvic rotation. You'll notice that when I rotate, my goal still is to close that carriage. Because you will see students that pelvic rotate and compress do this, where they just shift the hips, and you can really see if they're lengthening or not. If they're just dropping their right butt, the carriage won't move. But if they're truly rotating and creating that length, you're going to see that carriage move. And if you have a student that even needs more help and you notice they're not moving, put a little bit more spring tension on there. That's going to really stretch them so they can feel that. I call it that like corkscrew, and that little extra traction is going to help corkscrew them, because when we need to pull a cork out of a bottle, we just can't pull it, nor simply can we just twist it. We have to twist and pull. So getting your students to understand when you're doing pelvic rotation in a bridge, this is a really wonderful way to create that facilitation of traction and also give them a visual cue. I can tell my students just to look at that headrest. I don't have to turn my head. I can see it peripherally too. And as they're rotating, do they see movement in the carriage? Do they feel their knee reaching forward, or do they feel themselves just shifting and twisting? Remember, lighter is not going to give them that feedback. Medium to medium plus is going to give them that feedback and that traction sense. So err on the side of going a little heavier than not. Now, this concludes the bridge series, but remember, you can transition into so many different exercises. As I mentioned earlier, when I think we were on the box, if you want to go, let me just last but not least, I'll show you this one. If you want to go from, bridging and you want to do some hip flexors, simply flip that around. Don't make it as tight as I did. Put it under, do your bridging, change your D-ring to the back, and go right into some hip flexors. It's a wonderful way to do that. You can do some side plank hip flexors with your hips abducted. It's limitless what you can do when you start getting off the reformer, using the box, using the arcs, getting yourself a set of thigh cuffs and ankle cuffs. This can be done with ankle cuffs, that last series hip flexion too, which I love doing box hip flexion work. Taking it off, adding a handle, and doing some biceps. So I can seriously do an entire class, starting my clients on the box on the floor, doing some basic exercises, knee push-ups, some thigh stretches, some bridging without, load it up, do some bridging, and just keep them on the floor the entire time. It is wonderful. It's just like a trap table class too, when you don't have the trap table. So play around. Be sure to leave me comments if there's any questions you have about the Elements by Momentum World's thigh cuffs. And be sure to experience different exercises or different propping. Now, the only thing I didn't mention is if you have a Bosu ball, you can put a Bosu ball down there. You can also use a stability ball, whether you're doing back on for advanced stabilization. So the last part that I did when my back was on here and I was doing bridging, and then I flipped the D-ring around and I did knee tucks, the hip flexors. Do that on either a Bosu ball on your back or even a stability ball on your back. Or do the bridging when we started with feet on the box, do it feet on, as I mentioned, the arc, the Bosu, or a stability ball. There's so much you can do. I'm telling you, get off the reformer and start trying some floor exercises, especially the bridging with traction. Thanks for joining me.